Okay, so have you ever wished that you could just think in English? Like completely ditch that mental translation and have the words just flow naturally.
It's a common goal for a lot of English learners.
It is, and it can be a total game changer, right? Like when you reach that point where you're not constantly translating in your head, conversations become so much smoother.
Exactly. You can respond more quickly, you can express yourself more clearly, you can even understand native speakers better because your brain is already wired for English.
Right. It's like unlocking a whole new level of fluency and confidence.
Yeah,
But how do you actually get there? How do you train your mind to think in English?
well, that's what we're diving into today.
Yes, we are. We're taking a deep dive into a conversation between these two language experts, teacher Sam and Emily.
And they've got some seriously insightful strategies to share.
They do. Some of them might even surprise you. Like, did you know that you could use visualization techniques to help you think in English?
Or that something as simple as narrating your day in English can make a big difference.
Exactly. And we'll be exploring all of that and more.
Plus, we'll be discussing the unexpected benefits of thinking in English. Like, did you know that it can actually make you a better listener?
I've heard that. It's because your brain becomes more attuned to the nuances of the language.
Exactly. And that can have a ripple effect on all sorts of things like your career prospects or your ability to connect with people from different cultures.
So let's jump right in. What exactly did teacher Sam and Emily have to say about why thinking in English is so crucial for fluency?
Well, they really emphasize how thinking in English eliminates that mental barrier of translation.
Which can be exhausting, right?
Absolutely. And it really slows down your progress.
Because you're constantly switching back and forth between languages in your head.
Right. When you think in English, though, you can process information and respond much faster,
Hmm.
almost instinctively.
And that makes conversations so much more natural and enjoyable.
It does. And they also talk about how thinking in English improves your listening comprehension.
That makes sense because you're no longer trying to translate everything you hear on the fly.
Exactly. You're already in the right mindset, so you can pick up on nuances and idioms and all those little things that make English so rich and expressive.
It's like you're finally able to appreciate the beauty and the subtlety of the language.
Yes, and it can even help you develop a more authentic accent.
Oh, really?
How so?
Well, when you think in English, you start to internalize the natural rhythm and intonation of the language.
So you're not just memorizing words, you're actually absorbing the way native speakers think and speak.
Right. And that can make a huge difference in how confident and fluent you sound.
So thinking in English isn't just about speaking faster or understanding more, it's about connecting with the language on a deeper level.
It is, and that connection can lead to some pretty amazing benefits.
Like what kinds of benefits?
Well, for one, it can boost your confidence in all sorts of situations.
Because you're no longer afraid of making mistakes or struggling to find the right words?
Exactly. You can express yourself freely and authentically, which can be incredibly empowering.
And it can also open up new opportunities for you, both personally and professionally. Absolutely. Whether you're traveling the world, applying for a new job, or just making friends from different cultures, being able to think in English gives you a huge advantage.
It makes you a more effective communicator and a more confident individual.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if you're serious about mastering English, thinking in English is essential.
Okay, so now that we understand the why, let's talk about the how. What are some practical strategies that we can use to actually start thinking in English?
Well, teacher Sam and Emily have a whole toolkit of techniques.
But I think one of the most intriguing ones is the idea of shadowing.
Right, shadowing is a really powerful technique.
But it sounds kind of intimidating. What exactly does it involve?
It's actually simpler than you might think. You basically find an audio clip or a video in English, something you enjoy listening to.
Okay, so like a podcast or a movie?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you put on your headphones and try to mimic the speaker's rhythm and intonation as closely as possible.
So I'm like echoing them.
Yeah, kind of. But the focus is really on capturing the music of their speech. The way they stress certain syllables, the way they pause, the way they use their voice to convey emotion.
So it's not just about repeating the words, it's about embodying the way a native speaker would actually say them.
Right, and it can feel a little awkward at first.
I can imagine. But the more you do it, the more natural it becomes.
And it can have a profound impact on your own pronunciation and fluency.
Because you're training your brain to process English sounds and patterns in a more natural way.
Exactly. And it can also help you pick up new vocabulary and idioms without even realizing it.
So it's like learning by osmosis.
Sort of. You're immersing yourself in the language and absorbing it on a subconscious level.
Okay, so shadowing sounds like a really effective way to train your mind to think in English.
Yeah.
But what about visualization? How can that possibly help?
Well, visualization is all about harnessing the power of your imagination to create a mental image of yourself speaking English confidently and fluently.
So it's like a mental rehearsal for real-life situations.
Exactly. You might imagine yourself ordering coffee at a cafe in London, giving a presentation at work, or just chatting with friends at a party.
And by creating these mental images, I'm training my brain to associate English with positive emotions and successful outcomes.
Exactly. The more you visualize yourself speaking English confidently, the more likely you are to actually do it in real life.
Because you're building up a positive mental association with the language.
Right. And the key is to make these visualizations as vivid and realistic as possible.
So I should engage all my senses.
Mhm.
What do I see? What do I hear? What do I feel?
Exactly. And don't be afraid to get creative. You can even add in dialogue and imagine yourself having full-blown conversations in English.
So it's like directing my own mental movie in English.
That's a great way to put it. And the more you immerse yourself in these mental simulations, the more your brain starts to believe that they're actually happening.
And that can have a powerful impact on your confidence and your motivation to keep learning.
Absolutely. Now, another simple but effective technique that teacher Sam and Emily recommend is narrating your day in English.
That sounds easy enough. But does it really make a difference if I'm just talking to myself?
It might seem silly, but it's a great way to practice thinking in English constantly.
So instead of just going through the motions of my daily routine, I'm actively engaging my brain in English.
Exactly. So, for example, if you're making breakfast, you might say to yourself, I'm pouring myself a cup of coffee, or I'm toasting a bagel.
Oh, I can't believe I burned my toast again.
Exactly. The point is to keep a steady stream of English flowing through your mind, even when you're doing mundane tasks.
And that helps to solidify those neural pathways and make thinking in English more automatic.
Right. It becomes less of a conscious effort and more of a natural habit.
And they also mentioned something called thinking in questions, which I've never heard of before.
Yeah, it's a really interesting technique.
How does that work?
Well, instead of just thinking about things in statements, you try to frame your thoughts as questions.
So, for example, instead of thinking, I'm hungry, I would ask myself, am I hungry?
Exactly. And that forces you to construct a complete sentence in English.
And it also encourages me to engage with my thoughts more actively.
Right. It's like you're having an internal dialogue with yourself, but in English.
Okay, I like that. So we've got shadowing visualization, narrating our day, and thinking in questions. Are there any other strategies that teacher Sam and Emily recommend?
Well, they talk about how important it is to surround yourself with English as much as possible.
So like listening to English music and podcasts, watching English movies and TV shows, reading English books and articles.
Right. It's all about creating an immersive environment where you're constantly exposed to the language.
And they say that it's especially helpful to focus on content that you find genuinely interesting and enjoyable.
Because that will keep you motivated and engaged.
And they also emphasize the importance of finding opportunities to practice speaking English with native speakers or other learners.
Right, whether it's joining a conversation group, taking an online class, or just chatting with friends who speak English.
The more you practice, the more confident and fluent you'll become.
Exactly. It's like any skill, the more you use it, the better you get at it.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today. But before we wrap up, I want to touch on some of the unexpected benefits of thinking in English that teacher Sam and Emily mentioned.
Yeah, they go beyond just language skills.
Exactly. They talk about how thinking in English can actually improve your academic performance.
It makes sense if you think about it. If you're able to process information and express yourself more clearly in English, it's going to benefit you in all sorts of academic settings.
Right, whether you're writing essays, taking exams, or giving presentations.
Exactly. And it can also make it easier to learn other subjects because so much academic material is available in English.
So it's like opening up a whole new world of knowledge and opportunity.
It is. And they also talk about how thinking in English can help you build stronger relationships with people from different cultures.
Because it removes that language barrier and allows you to connect on a deeper level.
Right. You're able to understand their perspectives, share your own thoughts and experiences, and build genuine bonds that go beyond just superficial small talk.
And that can be incredibly enriching, both personally and professionally.
Absolutely. And they also mention how thinking in English can boost your self-confidence in a truly profound way.
Because it allows you to express your true self without the limitations of language.
Exactly. You're no longer holding back or censoring yourself because you're afraid of making mistakes.
You're free to be authentic and articulate, and that can have a ripple effect on all areas of your life.
It can make you a more confident communicator, a more effective leader, and a more fulfilled individual.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to ask you, what's the one key takeaway you'd like to leave our listener with today?
That's a good question. I think I would say that thinking in English is an achievable goal. It just takes dedication and the right approach.
Exactly. And the benefits are so worth it.
They are. And if I could leave you with one final thought, it would be this. What's one specific situation where you'd feel more confident if you could think in English directly? Picture yourself in that moment, speaking clearly, effortlessly, authentically.
Hold on to that image and let it fuel your motivation to make thinking in English a reality.
Just start small, take baby steps, but keep moving forward. And I promise you the results will be transformative.
So what are you waiting for? Start thinking in English today and open yourself up to a world of possibilities.
It's a journey worth taking.
It is. And we'll be here to support you every step of the way.
Absolutely. We'll see you in our next deep dive.
Until then, happy learning.